Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto sujedo ye alahadi samya sambuddho che. Namo sadanto sujedo ye alahadi samya sambuddho che. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Venerable Masters, all Dharma friends, may I invite you to pick up the text in front of you. We're going to recite the front title of the text in Chinese. It's 南无大方广佛华严经华严海会佛菩萨. So we can chant that together 7 times. This is one of the ways to invoke the presence of the Avatamsaka Dharma Assembly. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Good evening, everyone. We are here in Berkeley, California, in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Today is December 7th, 2013. We're investigating the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expansive Teachings. And right now we are on page 41, 40 and 41, on the second half of the page. Oh, okay. Jing He wants us to introduce ourselves. So, my name is Chuan. I'm a recently ordained monk, we just got ordained in August, and tonight, Rev. Heng Sure, we just got back from a trip to from Taiwan, and he's not a little bit under the weather. So, Jing He Sure and myself was asked to fill in for tonight's lecture, and he went over some of his thoughts and insights on the sutras. So, we'll be doing our best to share some of those and adding in some of our own reflections.
So being newly ordained monks, if there's anything that we lack in quality, we're trying to make it up in quantity.
Yeah. So tonight actually is a very approachable piece of text. It's on page 41, the second paragraph. And just to give a brief introduction to the text for those who might be new, the Avatamsaka Sutra, you could say, is the largest sutra in the Mahayana Buddhist canon. It's not the largest in terms of size, in terms of number of characters. The largest sutra is the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra. But in terms of breadth of the teachings, this one includes a lot. It includes teachings from the wisdom teachings, the prajna teachings. It includes teachings for the Bodhisattva path in great detail. It includes a lot. And includes many different Dharma practices as well. But the aspect of it that's the most, especially in this section we're going to read, is it explains the Bodhisattva's heart, the Bodhisattva's motivations behind practice. And so it's like, you could say, a window into the mind of the Bodhisattva. And what I always find from it is that it's very inspiring. It basically shows how good a human being can be, how good a person can be, how good a living being can be. And given the world and oftentimes what we get exposed to, an opportunity to open this text and get exposed to it is like a breath of fresh air. Just to give people a context, we're in the 10 Grounds chapter, and in the 10 Grounds is actually a very high-level bodhisattva. There's 53 stages in the bodhisattva path, and the 10 Grounds are the stages from stage 40 to stage 50. And so this bodhisattva is very, you could say, very accomplished. He's going on his path, and it's very close to realization of Buddhahood. We're on the 5th ground in the 10 Grounds, so we're in the 45th stage. So we're right in the middle of the 10 Grounds. And for those who are familiar with the 10 Grounds and the paramitas actually follow each ground. They link up. So for instance, the first ground talks about generosity, giving. The second one is about precepts or virtue, you could say. The third one is about patience. The fourth one is on vigor, applying effort. And the fifth one, which is the one we're on, is on dhyana, or concentration, or you can say meditation. So that's where we're on. The sixth one would be prajna, would be wisdom. So right now each of these stages matches each one of those paramitas. So right now we're on the 5th ground, the ground of difficult conquest. So if you could join me, we'll recite the Chinese followed by the English on page 40 and 41. So we'll start on the bottom. It says 佛子. So I'll say Chinese. I'll read the Chinese. My English is getting poorer as I get exposed to a lot of Chinese, but I'll do my best. And so the English or the Chinese starts with 佛子, and I'll say it, and then people can repeat. 佛子, 持菩萨摩诃萨, 复作是念, 持诸众生受如是苦, 孤穷困迫, 无救无依, 无周无色, 无导无目, 无明复义, 黑暗缠锅, 无尽为彼一切众生, 修行福智助道之法，独宜发心， 不求伴侣，
不求伴侣，
以示功德，
以示功德，
令诸众生被
众生
逼近清净，
彼清净，
乃至获得如来实力，
乃至获得如来实力，
无碍智慧。
无碍智慧。
We can read the English together. Disciples of the Buddha, this Bodhisattva Mahasattva further makes the following reflection. All those living beings are undergoing sufferings such as these. They are alone and destitute, and oppressed by difficulties. They have no one to save them, and nothing to rely on, no island and no house. They have no guide, and they have no eyes. Being covered by the cataracts of ignorance, and bound up by darkness, I now, for the sake of all those living beings, cultivate blessings and wisdom, the dharmas that aid the way. I make this resolve alone, and do not seek a companion. And I use the merit and virtue to bring all living beings to ultimate purity, up to it including seeing to it that they attain the thus come one's 10 powers and unobstructed wisdom.
I'm quite happy if you just. So, as Jin Chuan Shi mentioned earlier, this text is interesting because it states the reality of people who are far in their cultivation. A bodhisattva currently on the fifth ground, and that's a very accomplished bodhisattva indeed. But at the same time, as we explore the text, we'll find that the principles, the bodhisattva may be at a very high stage in his cultivation and in the control of his mind. But the principles of what we go through are really interesting because it shows us the potential that are open to ourselves if we choose to walk the same path. And the things that he does are actually doable or achievable by us if we choose to. So with that, just keep in mind that this text, although it states the reality facing a bodhisattva on the fifth ground, is also very, very relevant for our cultivation in our thought process. So we'll go through, we just read the text, so I'll just read it again. Disciples of the Buddha, this Bodhisattva Mahasattva further makes the following reflection. All those living beings are undergoing sufferings such as this. They are alone and destitute and oppressed by difficulties. They have no one to save them and nothing to rely on, no island and no house. They have no guide and they have no eyes, being covered by the cataracts of ignorance and bound up by darkness. So last week, Dharma Master Fan, who was a guest monk who was lecturing on the preceding text, he mentioned a lot about sufferings, the 8 kinds of sufferings, the 3 kinds of sufferings, and I was sitting at the back listening to him. So as I was listening to last week's lecture, I was reflecting upon the different kind of sufferings or dissatisfaction in life. And I guess even looking at my own experience in life, the first step would be to actually recognize what is suffering. Because if you don't recognize what is suffering, then basically we are just living in ignorance, or we have blinders on our eyes and we are unable to see the full picture of what's actually going on. So there are many kinds of sufferings, and they're really obvious sufferings, such as what's going on right now after the storm in the Philippines, and a lot of people are undergoing suffering there. We have storms locally right now, and a lot of people are suffering because of that. And so that's a lot of physical hardship. But there's also suffering that's a bit more subtle. Suffering that comes from the mind, for example. Not all suffering needs to be physical. My sister-in-law once told me when she found out that I wanted to be a monk, and she said, but why would you want to give up on life. To her, it meant that being a monk was to give up on life, as in withdraw myself from all the pleasures that life had to offer. And she said, just look at your body. Isn't it so wonderful how God gave us this body, and how complex the body is. And I agree with her. Yes, in my mind I was thinking, it is amazing how complex the body is. And she took the body to be a sense of joy and wonderment, and she was really right in doing that. But there's a flip side to that as well. Anyone who's ever been ill or sick will tell you that the body can also be a source of hardship or suffering. So my sister-in-law was seeing one side of life, because she was under those conditions that enabled her to see life in that way. But at the same time, the very thing that she was concentrating on could, for a lot of other people, did not bring them any happiness at all. In fact, I have known people who were undergoing terminal illness who actually wished that they had no body, or wished that they could leave the body or get rid of the body so that they could leave the suffering behind. So there's always a flip side to a lot of the things that we see. As for the obvious sufferings, we just have to take a walk out. We are in Berkeley, and we just have to take a walk out to People's Park, and we see a lot of people who are suffering right now, given the extreme or the very cold weather conditions they've been undergoing. These people, we just read, they have no house, they have no shelter. Sometimes they sleep right outside our doorway, because our doorway has provides a kind of like a shelter against the wind, and for them to be able to spend the night at a place like that, just to survive, it tells us how much suffering they have to undergo. So that's the obvious kind of suffering. And then the other kind of suffering sometimes don't really exist. It only exists in our minds. I had a story about when I was younger. I was walking past a group of my friends, and they were saying something, and I heard my name being mentioned, and I didn't quite hear what else they were saying, and they laughed. So my name was mentioned, and I could hear them laughing. And the first thing that came to my mind was that they were making fun of me, and that they were saying something about me or making fun of me. And then my mind started on its own course of creating its own reality. And it came to a point where my thoughts were, I don't need these people. I can be just as happy on my own. Why do I need these people? And then later, one of them, actually one of my good friends who were in that group, came to me and he said, hey, I was sharing that joke that you told me the other day, and everyone said it was a really good joke, and everyone was laughing. And that changed the whole perspective for me immediately, just like that. Everything changed. And then I realized then that my mind created this form of reality that didn't exist at all, that only existed in my mind. And I was suffering because of it, because of how my thought process went, and because I wasn't in control of my mind. I actually believed my own thoughts, to the point that I was ready to sever my friendship with those people just based on, what's the right word? Just based on
misunderstanding.
Nonsense, a nonsensical projection that had no basis or ground in reality. And how many times do we do that in our everyday lives, where we see something or we hear something, and our minds start to create realities. People, I don't claim to understand depression, but I understand that some people who are undergoing some kind of depression sometimes have problems getting out of that, because they self-reference their own mind. and they have no way to see a different perspective of what life could be.
Okay, so I just thought of something in terms of maybe another way to approach this, because sometimes just talking about suffering is a little bit heavy, and I thought, actually, Buddhism talks about suffering because it's something that we're letting go of. And underneath the suffering is actually this purity and joy that comes out once we see through that suffering, see through the ignorance. So as I look through this list, you can actually just flip it around. If you could see, so the Bodhisattva, of course, sees the living beings in this state. And I think at any time in our lives, maybe we can relate or know people who are in this state when they feel alone and destitute and not having anything. But if you flip it around, actually, we're very interconnected. None of us actually have to be alone. It's something that's a state of mind. Actually, when we're by ourselves, it doesn't mean we're alone. We're actually still connected with all living beings. I remember one feeling was actually after taking the precepts against killing, people go, well, can't kill mosquitoes, you can't kill spiders. Isn't that difficult? And I thought, well, actually my experience is really different. After I had a resolve to not kill, I actually no longer really felt alone. Even a little ant or a little spider in the room, there's a feeling of connection. There's a feeling of link. And so if we really look at these principles, if you flip it around, these are actually something that we add on. And the Bodhisattva sees that, and actually we're not alone. We're actually not poor. We have everything we need. Everything's inside. It says no one to save them. Actually, this Bodhisattva is, you'll see in the next section, is making vows to save living beings. So there are these great beings who are there to rescue us and help us. Nothing to rely on, no island, no house. Actually, we talk about the 3 refuges. We talk about the precepts. There are things that we actually can rely on. We actually can take refuge in. And so when each of these, you kind of look at it a little bit different from a positive angle, you see that the Bodhisattva sees living beings with these difficulties and will try to give them something else. We'll show them that underneath, they actually have something very pure and very wonderful. And I think that's really the heart of the message, the heart of what's being shown, is that underneath we have these good qualities that comes when we can peel away the suffering, peel away the confusion. And so in the next section, it talks about how he, for the sake of all those living beings, cultivates blessings and wisdoms and the dharmas that aid the way. So this is actually, you can say, the turning sentence, right? He sees the suffering in the world, which I think for many of us, we see that in the world when we maybe watch television for like 10 minutes, watch the news, read the newspaper. We could just easily get stuck into kind of a depressed state of mind just because of how often we see negative things around us. And when the Bodhisattva sees that, his mind turns to something else. He says, I now, for the sake of all those living beings, cultivate blessings and wisdom and dharmas that aid the way. And in the next section, which we'll go over in a little bit, he talks about his motivation for why he does that. So this is the Bodhisattva's response. His response is not to get depressed or to say, this is all hopeless, our world's going to end up in a disaster, the environmental issues or various things that are going on. He actually says, I'm going to make a resolve to cultivate the way in order to help, benefit, and save all living beings. And so what is he doing? Well, here it says, cultivate blessings and wisdom. And for those who are not familiar with blessings and wisdom, those 2 words, blessings comes from, you could say, doing good works. If you do good in the world, you help people, you have this generosity of your heart, it creates blessings. It's almost like, if you want to make an analogy with money, I guess you could say it's a little bit like goodness that you store up in a bank, and you have these blessings. Wisdom, on the other hand, is insight. It's able to see things as they really are. So you can see cause and effect. When you see something, you not only see what's happening, but you also see, oh, this is where it came from. So you can see, oh, somebody's undergoing this difficulty. That's because this was the seeds that they planted. And to help them out of that, I just need to help them remove those seeds. not worry about what they're going through now. I can help them and give them comfort. But if I can remove those seeds, then ultimately they can be removed from that suffering altogether. And so a very traditional Buddhist example of these two principles is, say somebody just cultivates wisdom. The image that's given is the arhat, who is awakened, who has very profound wisdom, that if he has not cultivated blessings, then he has no relationships with people. So he doesn't have the good affinities with people, so he has an empty alms bowl. He gets no offerings. So there's a picture of an ascetic, an arhat, but he has an empty bowl.
He's a hungry arhat.
A hungry arhat. And on the other side, for a being who's full of blessings, but say it didn't cultivate wisdom, then the picture is a big, you could say, very full, very content elephant with a necklace of pearls, the finest jewelry, and so the idea is, well, he's got blessings, he's a comfortable life, but he doesn't have wisdom. He doesn't even recognize the jewelry and the things that he's wearing.
This analogy of an elephant is used because in the past, the vehicle of choice, if you were a king, would be to ride an elephant. So if you were an elephant belonging to the king, you would be dressed up really well, you would have the best food to eat, you would have even jewelry to wear. But being an animal, your consciousness is limited to that of the potential of your form.
Yeah, so in this case, you're still in an elephant form. But for the ideal in cultivation is the Buddha. And so they say the Buddha is the doubly perfect one, the Liang Zhu Zun, which is perfect in wisdom and compassion. And there was always like a little bit of a joke that when they first translated that, because Liang Zhu means either complete or it also could mean foot. So they initially translated as doubly footed one. The Buddha is the doubly footed one. So that was a joke when I always hear in the lectures with the Venerable Masters lecturing is, yeah, when they first translated this text, they called it the Buddha the doubly footed one. That's actually an incorrect translation. So here it explains how the Bodhisattva is actually cultivating blessings and wisdom, which is, you could say, the path to becoming a Buddha. He's not just cultivating one of them, he's cultivating both.
How I like to see how blessings and wisdom can actually help. Obviously, blessings is how Jin Chuan Shu just explained, like having a huge bank account. And then wisdom is knowing how to spend the money. So you can imagine if you want to help people, and if you are Bill Gates, and you have all this money in the world, so you have the blessings of being able to actually translate your wishes into something concrete and use money to carry that out. So this is, before I continue, this is just a very worldly way to view why we should have blessings and wisdom. And then wisdom would be to know what projects that you want to actually carry out that will not have a negative effect. So if you want to benefit schools, for example, you would know what programs to back, to finance, what people to hire so that they don't cause more harm than good.
Okay. The next line I think is very, very interesting. It says, the Bodhisattva says, I make this resolve alone and do not seek a companion. And I go, that's interesting. Why would is the Bodhisattva trying to be like independent and saying, well, I don't need anybody else. I'm just going to do this on my own, What do people think? Is the Bodhisattva just kind of like, the cowboy going out on his own? I'm not going to depend on anybody else. I'm my own man. So I think probably not. I think the Bodhisattva is not rejecting others in this statement. He's not saying, I'm doing this alone, saying, I'm going to push away other people. Because why? It's very clear. Throughout the text, the Bodhisattva always asks for the support of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He speaks the text because the Buddhas is giving him strength. So there's a profound connection between the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas, and the Bodhisattva recognizing how much support he's getting from all beings to realize the way. So why would he make a statement like this? That's a good question. I think one way to approach it is that he's taking sole responsibility. He's not looking for someone else to, or making an excuse for himself. I'm going to resolve to cultivate the way and help others after I find a really good teacher, or after I get a really good friend, and then we're going to do it together. You know, or like Heng Sure was saying, oh, well, now there's both of us lecturing, so
No,
it would be like one of us would actually have the courage to lecture by ourselves.
I'm not going to lecture alone.
Yeah.
I need him.
Yeah, so, well, probably for us that still applies, but for the Bodhisattva, you can see that he's willing to take this on by himself. He's not afraid to take it on by himself.
He's not going to wait to see if there's someone to join him on this difficult quest to make him feel better. He feels so strongly about this that he's just willing to go on it alone. I'm sure if he had a companion, he would be a lot happier. But he's saying that he doesn't need one.
Yeah.
He's willing to do this alone.
And when I even reflect on myself, I think it's actually a really important principle, because oftentimes, at least for myself, when I'm cultivating, I'm always looking for somebody else to support me, or to say, oh, well, I'm going to walk this path. You know, I'm going to need somebody to help support me because I'm so new to this. But actually, there's a courage in saying, well, I'm really going to give this my best effort, regardless of the external situation, regardless of what's going on outside. And there's a faith, there's a kind of confidence in oneself, there's a kind of courage in oneself. And of course, people will come to support and help, but not having my mind attached and need somebody else to support me. And I think that's actually really much part of the monastic formation. The monastic form is that it gives us an opportunity to cultivate the path in a community, but in the end, we all know that we're here cultivating together by ourselves.
It's also not being afraid of failure and just trying your best. And if you fail, then you just say something dumb, you just then learn not to say it again and you try again. Harder.
Okay. So the next line is, I use the merit and virtue to bring all living beings to ultimate purity, up to and including seeing to it that they attain the thus come one's 10 powers and unobstructed wisdom.
Okay. Basically, to me, this means that he will do all he can to make sure that all beings achieve Buddhahood, which is to bring them to ultimate purity. And I just want to again emphasize why the text has the purpose of having sufferings being explained in the text. For example, and I'll now just revisit suffering again, although Jin Chuan has moved on. He's not suffering, I am. So when they say they are alone and destitute and oppressed by difficulties, when someone is sick, there's no way for someone to take that suffering away from you. You suffer, or you have to experience that all by yourself. It's not like if you don't feel like mowing the lawn, you can pick up the phone and call someone and pay someone to mow the lawn for you. When you hurt and your body hurts, it's only you that undergo that suffering. And it's to such an extent sometimes that you can't use words to make someone understand what you're going through at that point. And this is not a pessimistic way of seeing the world. This is just looking at the world for what it is, looking at life for what it is, what it means to have a body. Because we spend a lot of our time, actually if you look at the world right now, we spend almost all our time trying not to see that. We spend a lot of time trying not to see that we age, that the body is subject to sickness, and that everything that is subject to what we love is ultimately impermanent and will fall away. So a lot of advertising is to distract you from reality, and we buy into it because we want to be distracted from what is actually happening to us.
Okay, so just going back to the line.
Can I continue? So the Bodhisattva sees this and he understands the suffering that people go through, and he knows that left on their own, if no one tries to help them, there is no way they can come out of it. if you have any family members or any people that you care for actually suffer, you wouldn't understand how the Bodhisattva feels. And the Bodhisattva feels this on a greater scale. He sees this for all living beings. So he really wishes to be able to help all living beings. So the turning point in this text is, as we have gone through, I now, for the sake of all those living beings, cultivate blessings and wisdom. So he, as Jin Chuan Shi says, he takes all this suffering that people go through, and he sees that he can actually be in a position to help, and he uses that as fuel for his cultivation. So you can imagine him on the fifth ground, which is the ground of difficult conquest, which is where he enters the ground through meditation. He's probably in meditation somewhere all by himself, and it won't be easy because he has to be in concentration for long periods of time. If you look at the stories of the patriarchs, a lot of them undergo a lot of hardships. Either they go they undergo extreme weather, or they undergo long periods of time without eating because they want to concentrate on their cultivation. But how do they do it? They do it because their fuel is to help people, to extract them out, to make them to take them out of the suffering so that the suffering can end. And that will lead us to then the next passage. Do you want to have anything to add before we move on?
So this section, I use the merit and virtue to bring all living beings to ultimate purity. I think that's actually a really important principle because you can see what the Bodhisattvas, it doesn't say, I will use force or I will pressure living beings to realize Buddhahood. He says, I will use merit and virtue to bring all living beings to ultimate purity. And I think if that's one of the really, I would say for me, one of the main reasons I came to Buddhism was very inspired, was because in Buddhism, there's not a sense that you have to go out and even like convert people to be Buddhists. It's not like a pressure. It's the sense is you cultivate yourself, as he says, he cultivates blessings and wisdom, and you develop an inner virtue. And this is a kind of an internal purity of heart, a lifestyle that's harmless. You have this heart of wishing to benefit other people. And from that place, people are naturally moved to cultivate the way. I think people know the story of the Buddha himself, right? He saw, when he went out the gates, he saw old age, sickness, and death. And then he said, oh, this is really suffering, as we were just talking about. And then he saw a cultivator of the way who was peaceful, walking, and he said, that's it. And so that the cultivator represented virtue, you gotta say merit and virtue. He had a quality, an inner quality that moved the heart of the Buddha at that time, who was just still a prince, to then cultivate the way himself. The cultivator of the way didn't tell him, says, you have to follow this path, and give him a long lecture. It was the Buddha's heart that moved, that was inspired to ask for questions, ask for the Dharma. And so that's, I would say, the movement of Buddhism, is that we're here, and for all of us, it's the sense is we're living our life, and our ability to help others come from our own inner qualities of cultivation, how we can cultivate ourselves, and then that will help other people. I think this is a really important principle because it almost pervades all the actions we do throughout the day and our interactions with other people when it comes to religion, because there's not a need to seek outside to get people to do something, to join something. The whole spirit is, if we can cultivate ourselves purely, then other people will naturally find the goodness in that as well, because their inner goodness will resonate with that. And so I think, this is just kind of a funny story, which is that when I went to the City of 10,000 Buddhas as a volunteer, this is in 2005, I just finished college and I went to the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And so I think people know we have high school kids there, right? And an elementary school kid there. So elementary school there, so it's K through 12. And so for me, going there as a young man was, for a lot of those kids, a little bit strange, because for them, they're willing to be there, but at the same time, their experience of Buddhism was a little bit like, I just have to be there. I think maybe some people who have a correspondence in the West, maybe say going to Catholic school. And so they're feeling a little bit oppressed by Buddhism in some ways because they're growing up in a very Buddhist environment. And so for me, being there was like, that's very strange how you're interested. And when I talk with some of the people who say grew up with it, it's funny because we have almost exact same experiences about being in the monastery, let's say going to the ceremony or learning certain things about the precepts or about virtue. And for me, it's like, wow, this is so new and wonderful. And for them, they're like, I heard that so many times. My dad keeps telling me about it. My teachers keep telling me about it. Tell me something else. So it's a very interesting difference. And I'll say, if I were to, if I were to hope for those students, was that they can meet a good teacher. Actually, to be honest, I think they're surrounded by really good teachers and really good exemplars. And what I find is they return to that after they go to college and they have to explore on their own. They then go back to that afterwards. But they have to go on a little bit of adventure on their own. But the sense is that in the end, they're moved by virtue. They're looking for the consistency in the teacher. They're looking for the goodness in somebody. And when they see that, their heart moves. It doesn't need to have a label of Buddhism. It doesn't have to have a label of anything. So that's just an interesting thought.
So what it means if someone has merit and virtue, you will know when you meet someone who has merit and virtue because you naturally would look up to the person. You would want to follow the person. You would want to do things that will not make the person unhappy. It's a very natural physical and mental response when you meet someone like that. You just recognize, you can't quite put your finger on it, but you just recognize the virtue because virtue is unspoken. It goes beyond words. And some of you may have been lucky enough to actually meet someone like that and just have that sense of this is someone who I respect and I would want to follow.
Okay, so maybe we want to read the next section?
Yep.
So we have on page 42, the top on the Chinese. Maybe we can read it together. So it starts with 佛子. 佛子持菩萨摩诃萨以如是智慧观察所修善根皆为救护一切众生离益一切众生安乐一切众生哀悯一切众生成就一切众生解脱一切众生摄受一切众生令一切众生离诸苦恼令一切众生普得清净令一切众生悉皆调伏令一切众生入般涅槃 The English together. Disciples of the Buddha, this Bodhisattva Mahasattva in that way uses wisdom such as this and contemplates the good roots cultivated as all for the sake of rescuing and protecting all living beings, for the sake of bringing benefit to all living beings, for the sake of making all living beings happy, out of sympathy and pity for all living beings, in order to bring all living beings to accomplishment, to liberate all living beings, to gather in and rescue all living beings, to free all living beings from all sufferings and afflictions, to bring all living beings to universally attain purity, to cause all living beings to be tamed and subdued, and to bring all living beings to enter peri-nirvana. So just as a quick correction, on the first sentence, that very end, it says, uses wisdom such as those and contemplates the good roots. And you can say, you can maybe correct it, say, and contemplates the good roots he cultivated, and then period, all for the sake of rescuing and protecting all living beings. So if you cross out the as and maybe put a period and capitalize the all, it'll make it a little bit clearer. So
this is a list of why the Bodhisattva cultivates from here you can really see that first of all, he really understands living beings. And that you can see in, the second line, for the sake of making all living beings happy, and the one before that, for the sake of bringing benefit to all living beings. When I first encountered Buddhism, I was wondering why so many people had this affinity with Guanyin and Amitabha Buddha, and why other people don't. So I've actually seen someone who's encountered Guanyin for the first time, and their hearts immediately just open up, and they just understand, and it becomes something immediately familiar, or they had this sense that they had encountered Guanyin before. And then sometimes there were some people who would be surrounded by Guanyin and yet had this distance in their hearts that did not endear them to Guanyin. They just didn't see Guanyin in that light. They just saw her as something that they didn't have any connection with. I guess that's why the Bodhisattva tries his best to bring benefit to all living beings, and for the sake of making all living beings happy. I guess this is truly understanding people, because before you can actually help someone, they have to be happy, and you have to create a proper affinity with someone. How would I say, a relationship with someone before they can even see you as a friend. I had a group of friends, and there was this person who would always wanted to join our group, but he was kind of like a jerk, and because of that, we didn't really like him, and he didn't have any friends. And he could sense that whenever he was out with us, we wouldn't be as friendly to him as we would be with one another. But because he had no one, he still wanted to hang out with us. And then one day the four of us just came to a decision at the same time. We came to a realization that he was really lonely, and we consciously made an effort to start to include him. And just by doing that, something inside us changed, and that enabled us to be more welcoming to him. And he saw that straight away, and when our hearts changed, in the end he became one of our really good friends. We became even tighter as a group because he was there. So what I'm trying to say is that if you don't make living beings happy, and if you don't have the heart to want to help living beings, it's really hard for someone to even see you in friendly terms or see you as someone they would acknowledge when they see you. And I will just backtrack a bit and come to the previous sentence where the Bodhisattva in the the last fourth line at the end, and I use the merit and virtue to bring all living beings to ultimate purity. As we were discussing this passage with Reverend Heng Sure earlier, he was saying that this is where the transference, which is a practice of Mahayana, comes in, where you transfer your merit and virtue. To a lot of people, especially when I first encountered transference, I didn't quite understand how transference worked, because understand that if you have this heart of transference, how would it actually help someone? How can I transfer the merit and virtue, if I had any in the first place, to someone and have that someone actually benefit from it? And then this example of my friend came up, and I realized that transference first transforms yourself. And when you transform yourself, I believe it actually sends out a vibe that people can sense when they're near you. And one of the stories that I remember is that, like the Rambo Master, he would have pigeons coming to eat from his hand. And those pigeons, I did not do that from anyone else. I guess because the Rambo Master's heart did not portray any selfishness or any harm towards animals. There was also a story about, was it Ananda? One of the Buddha's disciples, there was also a pigeon, I believe, and the animal or the pigeon was afraid of the shadow of the Buddha's disciple, who was already an arhat. And people were puzzled as to why was this? And then the Buddha explained that it's because he had killing karma from from a life many eons in the past. But because he had not resolved that karma, there was still a stain on him. The bird naturally felt afraid even of his shadow, although his heart now he was already at a stage of an arhat. So from there we can see how our state of mind to those people around us can be imperceptibly picked up by people who may not even realize that they're picking up these signals.
Okay, so I actually wanted to share you could say a story from Mencius about this principle about benefiting all living beings and making all living beings happy. When I went to Taiwan this time, I was like, what book should I get to bring on the airplane? So I grabbed Mencius from our library. And I was reading, I was like, wow, these are really good stories and really good examples. I was thinking to myself, this is the foundation of Chinese culture? How come most Chinese families now don't use this as their basic fundamental principles to guide their families? I was actually quite surprised because the very first one is talking about not seeking profit. I was like, that's not what I learned.
Now you know why.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not, I thought this was the basis of Chinese culture. How is that? I mean, so there's really good stories in here. And they're actually very funny because the kings, so Mencius is talking to oftentimes the kings and giving advice to kings. They ask him for his advice. And so he gives advice to the kings. And he's not like somebody who's really into flattery or to like just to say something nice. He actually really pushes the king to have a heart to really benefit all living beings or to help his people. And so he does a really kind of fun story about that just struck me. So he says, this is book 1, part B. It says, King Xuan of Qi asks, is it true that the park of King Wen was 70 li or 70 miles square? Mencius answered, it is so recorded. Was it really as large as that? Even so, the people found it small. The king says, my park is only 40 miles square, and yet people think it's too big. Why is this? And so Mencius' reply was, true, King Wen's park was 70 miles square, but it was open to woodcutters as well as catchers of pheasants and hares, as he shared it with all the people. Is it any wonder that they found it small? When I first arrived at the borders of your state, I inquired about the major prohibitions before I dared to enter. I was told that within the outskirts of the capital, there is a park 40 miles square, in which the killing of a deer was as serious as an offense as killing of a man. This turns the park into a trap of 40 miles square in the midst of the state. Is it any wonder that the people consider it too big? Of course, there's a principle of not killing kind in there, so it's not the not killing. But I saw it's an interesting principle that because the king was protecting this place just for himself, it was considered too big. Of course, the people outside aren't sharing it. But when the other king had a much greater park, but it was something that everybody could share in, everybody thought it was too small. So I thought that was a very, you could see the difference in the scope of one's heart. And here the Bodhisattva, when he does something, he's benefiting all beings. He's benefiting all people. So his scope of his heart is vast, is great. So the next line we have is, out of sympathy and pity for all living beings. Okay, actually that's a pretty big topic. Because sympathy and pity, I think, is something that, pity is sometimes not the best word, because it often has a little bit of looking down on somebody. But my feeling is, if you really look at it, it's a sense of really deep empathy. It's really recognizing somebody's difficulty and wishing to help them out. And so you could say it's a really deep, empathetic care that the Bodhisattva has for all living beings, especially because he's able to tap into the great compassion, which in Buddhism is that we all share the same body. We can say we're all part of the same family. The Bodhisattva sees all beings as his parents or his or his friends or his children. And so he has this kind of deep empathy that I think we can see when a mother has a child, and when the child goes through pain, sometimes it's even more painful than the mother went through the pain herself. And so that's the Bodhisattva's heart. He has this deep connection with living beings. So the next line is, in order to bring all living beings to accomplishment, to liberate all living beings, and to gather in and receive all living beings. So in terms of accomplishment, I think that's an interesting word, because oftentimes in Buddhism we sometimes try to avoid saying we're going to try to accomplish something, to have some kind of external marker of success, because oftentimes that's just an attachment. So I think here, accomplishment.
It's a big word.
Yeah, it's a big word.
I would interpret accomplishment here as being to be able to equip living beings with enough skill to be independent of the suffering that they would have undergone if not. Does that make sense?
I think if you look at the word accomplishment, it's an interesting word, because I think here in just the normal way we use it, accomplishment is a little bit like you become CEO of a company, or you make $1 million, or you get that A on the test. And I think in a way, the Bodhisattva probably is helping living beings who have that aspiration to get that A on the test, hoping that they'll get the A on the test and then look past it and wish to purify their hearts as well. But I think there's also a deeper accomplishment that Buddhism talks about, and that's actually on the spiritual path. And interestingly enough, that accomplishment actually comes from not getting anything, but actually letting go. So you can say it's an accomplishment of letting go of stuff, like letting go of our sufferings, letting go of our afflictions. So the more we can let go, the more accomplished we are. So it's kind of like a paradox, especially when you are not familiar with Buddhism. It's like the more I can let go of things that I attach to, the more happy and the more content and the more accomplished I will be.
It means having the wisdom to let go of the things that will cause you suffering. So for some people it might be giving up smoking, for example. Some people it might be being a vegetarian and having that sense of wholesomeness. Whenever they eat, they know that they're not causing any living beings to die, just for themselves to survive. So it's just having the wisdom to let go of the things that would otherwise cause you pain or suffering in the future, and acting on those.
Okay, so the next one is liberation. That's a big word in Buddhism, is often associated with freedom. So especially here in the West, we're always talking about freedom. We're trying to be free. We're the land of the free, the home of the brave, home of the
brave, land of the free.
Home of the brave, land of the free.
I'm not American, and I know.
Yeah, so we're always we're actually into freedom, and I've always liked. There's actually one kind of catchy phrase discussing what true freedom is. The true freedom isn't the freedom just to do what we want to do, but it's a freedom from needing to do anything. It's the freedom of not needing to get anything. That's true freedom. So it's not freedom to express our desire, it's freedom from desire. It's not freedom to express our desire, it's freedom from desire. And I think that's a really interesting concept, because in the world we're mostly taught freedom is basically getting to do what I want to do. We got kind of the three rights, where we have my mind is blanking, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There you go. Yeah, so we have these things that we're kind of pursuing happiness. We have a freedom to do these kind of things. It's kind of to express our desires, to get what we want. That's freedom. That's what the marketplace tells us. That's what capitalism tells us. It's kind of built into what we expect. But really, freedom, in the most profound sense, is to be free of those deep cravings or urges that push us away from our fundamental nature, which is happy and content without all the external stuff. And that's something that's almost takes a new way of seeing things. It's like our minds have been trained to see things in this way, and now we need to turn it to see things in a different way. And it's not something I see that happens like overnight. Like we can say, oh, that makes sense. But it's something we actually have to hear over and over again and remind ourselves over and over again. And also, when we meditate, it helps us actually experience it for ourselves, because we actually see, oh, wait, when I meditate, I can actually be very peaceful and very content. And I'm not going out to grab anything. I'm not going out to buy something. And so that in Buddhism is you can say a first stage in liberation. And bit by bit, we get freer and freer as we get rid of our attachments, and we get less and less scattered, random thinking. It becomes more and more, we use the word here, pure sometimes. We get more and more sincere in our purity of intention and our conduct, and our conduct with our mouth. So
it means a happiness that is not dependent on, say, material things or having certain conditions around you so that I will be happy. So you're just happy just by yourself.
Yeah, so the next line, it says, gather in and receive all living beings. I actually always liked the idea of gathering in, although we always have debates about what's the right word for so. Right, I think that's the Chinese so. 色受一切众生, right? Yeah, so is gather and receive. But gathering in has a sense of like, the arm extends out and people just kind of gather. And you sometimes see pictures, I don't know if we have anything in the Buddha hall, where there's a Buddha or a great teacher, and you can see all the disciples just gathering to be in his presence, or we see it sometimes, in a lecture or a talk. Some people just actually naturally have a kind of aura around them, and people are just gathered in. You go into that person's presence, and there's a feeling of peacefulness. There's a feeling of
makes people
humor.
feel welcome.
Yeah, there's a feeling of welcomeness. Actually, out in my pictures I'll show today, I actually felt like one of the places we visited, the owner of the place had that ability to gather people in. He had quite a, when he spoke and when he did things, he had a way of gathering people in.
And receive all living beings, meaning the Bodhisattva does not discriminate to who you are, the color of your skin, where you come from, the clothes that you wear, or even if you are a good person or not. The Bodhisattva does not discriminate, and he just wants to be able to help you.
So free all living beings from all sufferings and afflictions. Actually, we spoke about that at length. To bring all living beings universally to attain purity. To cause all living beings to be tamed and subdued. Okay, so that I think is a interesting translation. Tamed and subdued. We've actually had many discussions around that term. 调伏, tamed and subdued. Because people go, I don't know if I want to be tamed and subdued. 调伏.
Actually, is what it more refers to, tame and subdued, are the afflictions of a person. So the person gets to tame and subdue his afflictions that cause him suffering, and it also tames and subdues his wild mind that also causes you some kind of suffering there. Yeah. And then ultimately to bring all beings to enter paranirvana, which is also what it means to attain purity, which is to be a Buddha, ultimately to achieve Buddhahood.
So just to go back with the tamed and subdued. So another translation that we've been using much more now is actually bring into harmony. So the idea is that because tiao actually also has a sense of music. So you adjust a note so it's just right. So it's like, okay, so as a living being, if they're tuned, like tune a note. So so if say a living being is too tight, right? Just like a music's too tight, they're too ascetic, they're too bitter, they're tight in their practice. Then you want to bring them to the middle. If somebody's just hanging out all the time, just really loose, then you bring them to the middle. If somebody's too wild, then you attune them to the Dharma. So another word we use is attune them to the Dharma. So this concept is a sense of basically bringing somebody who, for instance, is a little bit off balance. You bring them back into balance, back into the middle. And so there's also the analogy of actually a wild beast. And that's why oftentimes tamed and subdued is used, because you actually tame and subdue like a wild elephant or something, and they're charging. You have to tame and subdue the wild elephant, or the monkey mind. We kind of can tame our monkey mind. So that's what the Bodhisattva's heart is he wishes to do all these things. These are his motivations for why he cultivates, and why he cultivates wisdom and blessings. Questions?
Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Before we move on to...
Yes. Okay, so Suzanne was commenting that she thinks that the 成就一切众生, which is a section, in order to bring all living beings to accomplishment, the accomplishment here connects to. You want to say it yourself, Suzanne? You have a mic now.
Thinking the 成就 is actually the ultimate accomplishment, which is Buddhahood.
So, and also you mentioned how she sees the Bodhisattva like supporting on the side of living beings to help them realize Buddhahood. So that's the 成就, the feeling of 成就. You're there supporting somebody to realize something. You can see that parents on the back, supporting their kids on the soccer team. Score the goal. Sometimes the parents get really emotional. I have to say, you watch soccer games. Any other comments or questions? Yes?
Can you elaborate a little bit on the differences between nirvana and parinirvana?
Parinirvana and nirvana. You want to?
Which one? What is saying?
Does somebody want to try to field that? I think I have an answer, but I'm not 100% sure. So if anybody is 100% sure, do they want to answer? Or I can say what I think, and then people can correct me.
Please be compassionate.
Anybody?
Paramita?
I don't think it's paramita. Yes?
Maybe parinirvana is nirvana from which you don't come back again. But nirvana probably can happen over and over again, perhaps. I don't know. That's how I hope.
Yeah. Better.
Fede, yeah.
So my understanding is that basically nirvana journey refers to the attainment within the lifetime of someone who's enlightened, so like an arhat or a Buddha, and then parinirvana is what he enters when his body disintegrates. So
Could you repeat the last sentence?
well, so when the Buddha enters parinirvana is when he passes away,
Yeah.
and then enters. But apparently there's also texts in which it's the distinction is not clear. But in general, this is the way the distinction is drawn.
So that's also kind of what my understanding was in terms of how it's split up. So oftentimes we say in Chinese, say the Venerable Master entered parinirvana, which means he left this world, he left this body. Venerable Master would say Ru Niepan. This is often, as it's translated, is entered parinirvana. So it's actually when the Buddha realizes nirvana, he's still he still has his body. So he's considered nirvana, he realizes the state. And after his body dies, and he leaves his body, it says the Buddha entered parinirvana. So I see that being used in that context most of the time. I'm not sure if that's like the ultimate definition, but at least that's one context it's used.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Does that answer your question?
Okay, so I'll repeat again. So the Buddha, say he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, Shakyamuni Buddha, and he wakes up, and we say he realized nirvana. right? So that's the term we use for he wakes up. Now, when he passes away, at the very end, when he's lying on his side, and all his disciples gather around, and there are actually some are sad, like Ananda is very sad that the Buddha is passing away. When he actually passes away, they say the Buddha entered peri-nirvana. It's the nirvana with no longer having the body. He goes to peri-nirvana.
That leads to another question. Then why in the sutra using pari-nirvana for all living beings
Well, we hope
instead of nirvana?
Instead of nirvana? Ofeda just mentioned that sometimes these are used interchangeably, nirvana, peri-nirvana. But it still makes sense, even if we want to use peri-nirvana here, as saying that the Bodhisattva hopes that when all living beings pass away, they're entering peri-nirvana. They've realized nirvana in their lifetime, and they're going to,
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. We're not just going to our next confused rebirth, I guess, in cycle. This is going to be that the Bodhisattva, all living beings actually realize nirvana.
I think in this context, you can substitute paranirvana for nirvana, and it will still have the same meaning. Yeah.
Any last questions? If not, we can look into the slideshow. Any last questions or comments?
No?
No?
Okay, slideshow.
Okay, so we have a slideshow, so I'll just do a quick introduction. So we just recently got back from 13 days in Taiwan. We got back on December 3rd. And when we were in Taiwan, we visited, Reverend Heng Sure led a delegation, and it was mostly for the Dharma Buddhist University and a newly established Xuan Hua Educational Foundation, which is kind of a foundation that's going to help support the vision of education of the Venerable Master, as well as the cultural arts and how the arts express humanity, maybe how the arts can re-enliven humanity. And so the theme of this trip was actually Buddhism without borders, reanimating the teachings. So actually, it's a very interesting concept. Buddhism without borders, meaning Buddhism is not limited to any country. It's not Chinese, it's not Indian, it's not American, it's not West, it's not North, it's not South, it's not East. So the idea is that Buddhism doesn't have any borders. And then the idea is reanimating the teachings is saying we're trying to take the ancient texts, say like Mencius, and making it come to life in the modern times. So reanimating it, giving it new life. And so the idea is doing that with Buddhism. And so what I want to show you is just one small portion of the trip, which was when we visited a place called Inga, which also is called like the pottery town in Taiwan. And for me, it was actually a physical, artistic representation of exactly what we were doing. It was for me completely unexpected. I first thought, okay, we're just gonna go. It was completely presented in the kind of funny way, because I was like, oh, this is a free day. We're gonna go see this pottery town. I was like, we're gonna go see pots.
He thought he was going to see.
Yeah, just some pots and cups, which we did. And I was like, okay, so I'm not that into sightseeing or just seeing pots, but okay, I'll just go along because I always can learn something, right? And so we go, and we saw something completely different. I'll show you in the pictures, but it was just like going in and seeing a whole different world. And it's really reanimating the teaching. So I'll show you the pictures. So maybe we can pull down the screen. Okay, well, so we have, this is just a picture from the bus, so there's nothing too special about this picture. But basically, just to tell you a little bit of backstory. So one day of the trip, we were going to go visit this place called Inga, which is known to be a pottery town. So they make very, I would say the whole place is dedicated to pots. And so we were going to this place to, as far as I understood it, to go see some pots. And so I said, okay, let's go. And so here is one of the pots we saw. So first we went to this kind of open area, which is kind of like their display area. And we said, okay, this is interesting. And people had some coffee and things. And they started showing us bit by bit more and more. And I was quite struck at what was being shown. So first, just to give you a sense, so then we go upstairs and there's this is actually probably the largest handmade pot in the world, just so people have a context. So basically they did this in sections. They made this pot, and this is huge. If you look at it, it's taller than a person. So they have all these various pots that you can see in the place. So you can see actually they brought us up to see actually the artists making the pots and making the artistic displays that they have, and they paint various things on it. And when they do it, you can see that they actually don't know what the color is exactly until they fire it. After they fire it, the colors become vibrant. So you can see up here the pot, and you can see down here what it's like beforehand. So the artist has to go in and draw in the little things. So I'm kind of going, okay, this is getting more interesting. I'm kind of looking at seeing the stories. And then what happens, we actually get pulled into the, let's see. So we go into the place, and we actually walk into another section of the whole building, and this is actually the owner's kind of private collection of art. And it's pretty amazing. So this is his office space. I just gave you the sense of the wall on his wall. You can see it's kind of got a artistic, modern feel to it. And so each of these panels, he has this room filled with panels of art on it. And each of them are like exquisite art. It's like, wow, in my whole life, I've never actually seen art like this before. And so for me, it was like, whoa, I'm not very culturally, I would say I'm not artistic, I'd say, by nature. I grew up in America, Silicon Valley, kind of more technological engineering based. So I kind of have a little bit of appreciation of the arts, but it's not something I really cultivated, I think, throughout my life. But even for me, it was like, wow, that's amazing. And so we got to see a lot of very, very amazing artwork. So you can see this is another how the panels came out. This was one of the tour guides who showed us around. And what really struck me when he was showing me around was how at ease he was with all the artwork. He knew like all about how it was made, the history, the artists who made it. He was just really had a mastery of the subject matter that really struck me. I was like, wow, this guy really loves what he's doing. So you can see, so here is actually, we were in the office with the artist. Mr. Chen was people know Wayne Chen. Mr. Chen is Wayne Chen's father. And so he's the one who set up the appointment. Later, I asked him about it. I said, so, wow, that was really amazing how we got that. I had no idea we were going to do that. I thought we were just going to see some pots. Mr. Chen's response was, why would I waste your Dharma master's time like that to go see some pots? Of course it has something else. I said, well, that wasn't written in the schedule. I didn't know we were going to meet anybody. So he introduced us to the owner of the whole establishment, which was called Taihua, or also name was Inga Gugong. And Gugong is, the phrase actually is like the Imperial Palace Museum, which is where they have really a huge collection of fine art in the Gugong, which is in Taiwan. It's a huge, I actually got to visit there as well. It was a huge place of a lot of the things came from China when they went to Taiwan, so they have a huge repository of this really ancient artwork. And so when he wrote that, Mr. Chen said he saw this and thought, wow, they have a huge audacity to call themselves Gugong. And so when he went in and started meeting the people and started talking to them, he thought it was actually really earned his reputation. And so Mr. Chen, over many years, came to this place almost a little bit as a refuge. He said
because his son and his daughter, I don't know if Stacy's actually here, but his wife all in America because his children were going to school in CDDB and his wife was accompanying them. So this place a little bit became his refuge. He would come here and look at their artwork because he was alone in Taiwan. So you can talk about the suffering of being alone and finding some solace, some refuge. So he was introducing us to this place and the owner. So you can see our group. Actually, this is the second time we visited. The first time we visited, we had a smaller group. And the second time, we were like, everybody, you really missed out. You have to go see it. So we went a second time. And we brought all the nuns along, too, to take a look. Because they didn't join us for the first time. So then they came and we joined us as a group. So Marty actually was like super excited as well. And he was videotaping. The second time he was really prepared, so he videotaped almost every single thing they said. So he was like that for the whole conversation, recording what they were saying, because he was very excited. Basically because and I'll show the artwork in a little bit, was they were really doing exactly what we were trying to do as well with Buddhism, going to Taiwan. And it was like this immediate connection. It was like, wow, you're doing what you're trying to do with artwork and pottery and art, what we're trying to do with Buddhism. And so there's a natural affinity. So the owner explains to us what he is talking about. And that's what I was mentioning before about the idea that there's a kind of gathering in. I would say he gathers in artists. Let's see about the picture. Okay. So these three here on the left are artists, and he first had them. So we wanted him to talk about his philosophy and what he's doing because he talked to us about the first time. So we'll have the artists first talk to us about what they thought. And so the artist basically said, first, Mr. Liu, who's the owner there, he really respects artists. He really respects us. And you can see it was really moving for that artist. He was like, he really respects us. And he really supports us. He gives us a place to work. He gives us actual financial resources to take care of ourselves. He says he just gives us the freedom to create. He doesn't give us any pressure. He says, I started from not knowing how to draw at all, maybe being humble, but I came from not knowing how to draw at all, drawing until I learned how to draw from being here. And he's been there for over 15 years, being in this place. And Mr. Liu, who's the owner, says, artwork isn't about, or you can't really get artwork by saying, okay, you invite this great artist to come to your place and draw something for a couple of days, like 3 or 4 days, and then leave and call that artistic exchange. No, you need people to give their entire lives to it. It's from 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They come in and they give their lives for it. And from there, from that collaboration, all these artists working together, does something come up. So in his place, he actually comes 200 artists, comes very, very frequently, pretty much long term. And he has probably 300 artists who are always coming back and forth. So he has a huge artistic community that's in this little, you would not even recognize it, because out from the outside, it just looks like a normal building. It just doesn't have any really fanfare. It's just kind of like this plain building outside, and this little, looks like a coffee shop on the side. But when you go in, it's like a whole other world. It's like, wow, it's like Alice in Wonderland. You like go in a little hole and you, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just this kind of unfolding. I actually want to show this picture because if what they're looking at is a pamphlet from a previous delegation, I think in the 1970s, when Reverend Heng Sure, Marty at that time was Heng Chao, Dharma's Heng Chao, and Doug were on a trip, as well as other people were on a trip. And so they're looking at this pamphlet, and here's a picture of it more close up. Can you see it? It's actually a perfect picture because you can actually see who's that in the background, and then the picture of him when he was in the 70s. So all of them were kind of looking and saying, wow, so these are the people? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so yeah. Doug commented, yeah, Master Hua had no problem with him. He says, that Master Hua never said a word about cutting any of his hair. So he created a space for them to work. And this is a space. You can just see, this is where the artist, so on this floor where they have the manufacturing or the creation of all the pots, on the other side of the place there's this room, and you can see this whole wall is a long wall. It's all glass, and it just overlooks the city. It's a really beautiful landscape. You can see it from the side. It's only half of it. The other side still, or the other side has a little bit more. But it's a beautiful landscape, and inside people are just doing artwork. And he said because for him, in the manufacturing process, if it was just manufacturing art, that's, it's kind of, that's all going to go to China. There's no heart there. So what you do is, he said, I need to bring the artists in. And when the artists are there, there's like a life to it. Artists are always having new ideas. Every couple of days, they're always having, let's do this different, let's do that differently. And it inspires people. So the people who are working there, who are creating, the pottery and the things, they get to be in the presence of all these artists who are constantly having new ideas and they're working with them. So he has this kind of complete philosophy. And I actually thought his philosophy also connected a bit with the Avatamsaka, because he also says something which was, we're doing this art in this spirit. You can see a lot of ancient artwork. For instance, when we go to Gugong, to the Imperial Palace Museum, we go to the museums, and there's these great pieces of art that inspire us, that we see. And so we say, well, that's great, but do we leave anything for our future generations? So that's what we're trying to do, is that not only do we have the previous generations to inspire us, but we need to also leave things that will inspire the next generation. And by having that grand of a vision, then we don't ever attach to what we're doing. We don't ever think, oh, we've got there. It's that success. And I think that's actually connected with the Avatamsaka, because in the Avatamsaka Sutra, for me, it's always been the vision of the Bodhisattva's heart is so vast. And so when we're cultivating the way, it's like we have a little bit of a quote-unquote accomplishment. We really can't attach to it, because in the scope of the Bodhisattva's heart, it's just like this tiny little drop. It's almost nothing. And so with a very grand vision, he has a spirit of non-attachment, of not going out, of not saying, oh, this is it, and not sticking at a place. It's like we're just always trying to create, always trying to learn, always trying to inspire other people. And so I really think his spirit, he had that. So here's the artist doing some of his art. You can see it's actually, the beginning of it actually has some modern Western influences. He's also trained in the West. So this is another artist. He's actually a professor at the nearby college, I think, of art. Okay, so here's some of the artwork. I don't think all of it was produced by them. I think some of it was what they collected. He collected as well. But basically, the thing that inspired me the most was that it really was reanimating the teachings. So here, I'll say most of the collection I got is Buddhist, that I'm showing because we're in the Berkeley Monastery, right? So, but he had a lot of other things as well. But in terms of the Buddhist artwork, I thought they had a contemporary feel to it, but it was clearly also traditional. And so for me, growing up in America as an Asian American, right, in Asia, it kind of excited both of my halves of my experience. Growing up in Asia, I could connect to it. Okay, that's an Asian. But my Western education upbringing goes, wow, that's a really awesome picture. I can really see that being inspiring. And it's not seen as something foreign, like something that's long, long ago, far, far away, and I'm just kind of in an ancient time. So it's not, as I said, it's not bound by culture, not bound by space. So this is a painting. You can see the kind of liveliness and spirit. So yeah, so you see the Bodhisattva. It's just like, wow. This is like the original artwork. It's not a copy. It's like the actual oil painting there. You can see it, and you look at close, and you can see the amazing work that was put into it. I think the other element was that the artwork was almost like alive. You feel like somebody really put their heart into this, and really, it's not just like a print and mass-produced. This is Guanyin Bodhisattva. So they're creating images like this. So it looks modern. It also looks, ancient. Bodhidharma. This is from a root of from a tree branch. You can see it's got a really strong spirit. There's a lot of Bodhidharma images. So you can see the life in the pictures. Another Bodhidharma. So he looks almost alive. What's he looking at? Meditating. a little bit modern art. So some things probably wouldn't quite work in the Buddhist monastery, but you can kind of see how they're pushing the artistic boundaries. This is just kind of cute pictures of a little, maybe this is probably a monastic in the Shami. We talk about purity today. I think we often associate purity with youth. I think it's because there's a purity of heart before we have all this kind of confused thinking comes in. There's just like a purity that's expressed in the artwork. This is kind of cute. Teapots. So they actually have a lot of teapots in pottery, I have to say. So this is Bodhidharma from another stand. Bodhidharma. A lot of Bodhidharmas. And all of them have this quality. It was like, so I was like going through like, wow, this place is different. This place is, whoa, what? Yeah, so this is Earth Store Bodhisattva, their creations. One in Bodhisattva, riding a dragon. Yeah. So you can see everybody got more and more excited as our group started looking around. It's like, wow, we were like, we really need to invite these people to the city and to America, and we should collaborate. Bodhidharma. Looking at a little bird. I think I've showed this already. So this picture, actually one of those artists that I showed previously actually drew this picture, the one on the very left. Marty actually talked about it yesterday as well. And so basically this image, he said, oh, you took a couple years to draw this picture? He said, no, I just drew it in a day. He said, oh, a day? Actually, it just took a couple hours. It's like, wow. So yeah, this was quite a, when you're actually in the picture, you could feel this kind of care radiating from the picture. A kind of we say sympathy and pity for all living beings. I mean, we don't need to use words. You can have images just, whoa, I see it. I feel it. It's not something that I have to say. I thought this was kind of interesting because there's a little bit of a different, I've never seen Guardian Bodhisattva in that posture before. That's more like Virgin Mary. So yeah. So they actually had one store. So there's another street that's actually the main tourist spot. So we just kind of went there afterwards, but we didn't actually go to any of the other stores. We just went to their stores on that lane. They had 7 stores on that lane because all the other stores they couldn't compare to what they had. We're like, wow, this is way more interesting. So they had one store that was just all Buddha images. So this is one of the images in the store. Okay, so I just want to tell a quick story, because this is probably for me one of the most inspiring pictures or images I saw, which is Weito Bodhisattva. I don't know if it comes up that clearly, but the reason for me the Weito Bodhisattva was so inspiring was because as I usually see Weito Bodhisattva, he's standing with his sword and he's very stern and a Dharma protector. But here you have him in a slightly different posture, but he's really, you can see he's really stable, very much like, he's definitely there. He's definitely, you can say the martial artist. He's like a master martial artist, right? But at the same time, you can look at his face, and his face is so peaceful and calm. Okay, I can try. His face is very, very, it's like his face is just a kind of calm, peaceful face. It's not a kind of a warrior, oftentimes in the West, which is kind of like a grizzled, aggressive look. It's just kind of like peaceful, in samadhi, but at the same time, you know that you don't want to cross him. He probably can, he's definitely a Dharma protector at the same time. He's got the chi. And so these images carried a kind of chi to them. Marty and Reverend Heng Sure both comment, wow, you look at how they've centered it. You can see the chi in their dantian. It's really well aligned. And so for me, this was a kind of a combination of the ancient tradition of the Bodhisattva images, but I think a Westerner looking at this image will go, I can relate to that. That's something that I can see is inspiring. It's not something that I see as an ancient picture that's far, far away. It's something that is present and alive now. So that's Weito Bodhisattva. And here's Chelan Bodhisattva, oftentimes Guangong, right? Guangong. I thought this was kind of fun because he was reading a book, and DRBU's program is about great books. So you can see. So real men read books. Obviously the slogan would be real men read books. Yeah. This I think is probably bronze. This one's bronze. They use all sorts of materials. They use most ceramics, but this one's bronze. They also have special stone that they use that they grind up and put a little bit of metal in. So when you touch it and you rub it, it actually starts shining like skin. So that's another. So this wasn't what they did. We saw this immediately, and this is actually a Song Dynasty image of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva. So this is one of the ancient, inspiring pieces of Buddhist imagery. And I think the thing that the images do, a good image does, is that it teaches as well. You see it, and your heart immediately is inspired by something else. We just talked about merit and virtue inspiring somebody. I think you can sometimes see it in the image. Probably it's coming out from the artist himself. That they have something or some quality that they see that they can create that moves somebody to another space. So for cultivators of the way, when we see something, it's like, wow, that resonates. And so this is, I think this is Zhuge Liang. This is just a picture because you can see the expression on his face. It's like, it's just alive. That's what I feel. It's like, whoa, this is alive. You got the various Dharma protectors. Another Dharma protector. I think this might also be Weito Bodhisattva in a different posture. So a couple pictures from Inga. There's a lot more. So those pictures actually, I can't take credit for the pictures. I took a couple of them, but most of the pictures came from one of the nuns, Jing Guoshi, and a couple of our Marties. And so, but this just gives you a sense of the spirit of what this small group of artists, or actually a pretty large group of artists, is doing. And I think they're really bringing, you could say, humanity forward through the artwork that they're doing. So that was really inspiring for me. One of the main unexpected things I learned was kind of seeing artwork like that, which I never expected, which I'd never seen before. So, okay. We do the transference of merit. It's in your book. Maybe we can put the screen up, and we'll do it together. Okay. So for those who are new, the dedication of merit is on the back of your sheet. So we were just talking about transference today, and so the idea is that this is a way that we can give the goodness from this, you could say, from coming here and investigating the principles of the sutras together, hearing things about goodness and purity and a kind of profound wisdom. And so it looks like Alan even has his guitar. So we have a supporter to help things come to accomplishment. So this is a time you can reflect and think to yourself maybe what you see in the world that might need some extra support. If anybody in your family is sick or ill or unhappy, or you want to give it to all living beings, you're welcome to. But the idea is really in your heart, think of something sincerely that you want to give to. And this song just gives it a form so that we can express that aspiration. So this is a very, very important practice in Buddhism. Ready?
This boundless light break the darkness of their endless life. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay, so if we could all stand up together and bow to the Buddhas. So please get up slowly if your legs are asleep. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Namo Davang Guang Fo Hua Yan Ying Hua Yan Ai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Davang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan